Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we've got an exciting question to tackle, one that a lot of developers wonder about. Can we use both application.properties and application.yml together in Spring Boot? Will Spring Boot magically merge properties from both files? And here's the real kicker. What happens if both files contain the same key? Which one wins? We're not just going to talk about it, we're going to test it out live. So stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how Spring Boot handles multiple configuration files and how you can control which one takes priority. Ready? Let's dive in. Alright, let's put this to the test. Right now, we have the user.username key inside our application.yml file. But what happens if we move it to application.properties and remove it from application.yml? Will Spring Boot automatically pick it up, or will it run into issues? Alright, let's dive in and test this out. First, let's create an application.properties file in src/main/resources directory. Now, instead of keeping user.username inside application.yml, let's move it into application.properties. Remove it from application.yml. Time to run the application and check. Let's start the application. Let's switch over to Postman. Now, let's test our getUser API at the configuration/properties/demo endpoint, which we set up in an earlier video from the Spring Boot Configuration Essentials playlist. And there it is. We got the expected username in the response. But wait, remember, we moved username from application.yml to application.properties. And yet, everything still works perfectly. So, what's really happening behind the scenes? So, what's happening here? Spring Boot is actually merging properties from both application.properties and application.yml. But here's the real question. What if both files contain the same key? Which one takes priority? Let's test it out. Now add the user.username key back into application.yml. And change the value of username to a different one in application.yml. Restarts the application. And hit the API again. And there you have it. As you can see in the response, the value from application.properties is being used, even though the same key exists in application.yml. So, what does this tell us? Before we jump to any conclusions, let's test this again. What if this behavior was just a one-time thing? Let's restart the server. Alright. The server is up and running again. Now, let's hit our API once more and see if we get the same result. As you can see, even after restarting, Spring Boot is still picking the value from application.properties. That confirms it. So, what does this tell us? Well, it's pretty clear. Spring Boot prioritizes application.properties over application.yml when both contain the same key. That means if a property exists in both files, the value from application.properties will always override the one from application.yml. No surprises here. Spring Boot consistently follows this rule, ensuring a predictable configuration loading process. Alright, let's clean things up. First, let's delete the application.properties file. And roll back the changes in application.yml so we're back to where we started. Now, here's an important takeaway. Keeping both application.properties and application.yml in the same project isn't recommended. Why? Because it can lead to confusion and unexpected behavior. However, Spring Boot does allow both to coexist. It merges the properties from both files, but as we just saw, application.properties takes precedence when there's a conflict. So, be mindful when using both together. That said, this setup can be useful when you're migrating from .properties to .yaml or vice versa. You can gradually shift your configuration without breaking everything at once. Smart move, right? Alright, let's wrap up what we explored today. Spring Boot does allow both application.properties and application.yml to coexist, but it's not always a good idea. Keeping both can lead to confusion and unexpected behavior. However, if you do use them together, Spring Boot will merge the properties from both files. The key takeaway? If the same property exists in both, Spring Boot prioritizes application.properties over application.yml, meaning the value from application.properties will override the one in application.yml. This behavior can be helpful when migrating from .properties to .yaml or vice versa, ensuring a smooth transition without breaking existing configurations. However, for cleaner and more maintainable configurations, it's generally best to stick to one format. In our next video, we'll explore how to load properties from external configuration files beyond application.properties and application.yml. So, stay tuned for that. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps us going. See you in the next one.